Yeah. It's December 5th, 2013, and tonight's the City Council Education Partnerships, and we're going to meet for discussion regarding organization of the Greater Lowell Technical High School Board and counter proposals from participating communities. Roll call? Here.
Here.
Councilor Leahy, Councilor Madonza.
Here.
3 present.
Thank you, Mr. Clerk. First, I'll open up any questions to any of the councilors who want to make a statement, or
Well, I
Councilor
guess-
Kennedy?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would just remind the members of the committee that we met with the towns back in the earlier part of the summer. And I think at that time there seemed to be a consensus that everybody would endorse option C, which is one of the 5 options available. However, since that time, one of the communities has decided that they would prefer option E, which calls for the vocational school board members to be appointed rather than to be elected, and that's where we are. I think we've made a good faith effort to try to negotiate with the towns. I think at this point that since we no longer have consensus, that we've probably exhausted all of our avenues, but I think the city solicitor is here, and maybe the solicitor could tell us where all of the towns stand at this point.
Sure. As you were saying, we'd had the meeting, and pursuant to the meeting, there seemed to be a consensus reached amongst those attending the meeting and the representatives from those neighboring towns. However, when they went through the process and had their town meetings, they each came up with a different resolution, which effectively has the result of nullifying really the agreement that we had earlier come to. In the case of Tingsboro, they did adopt the provision that we had sort of collectively discussed. Drake, as Councilor Kennedy indicated, adopted the 5th approach, and that is having an appointed member. And Dunstable did not select any one of the 5 and chose an option that seems to mirror language for expanding board membership, but that's under other circumstances within the legislation itself, and it really has little, if anything, to do with the issue that's before this subcommittee. So effectively, all 3 are selected different options.
I guess my question now, legally, where would we go next? Councilor Kennedy did bring up a good point with his motion to follow the one vote. You would run throughout the 7 communities, and the highest vote getter in each community would go to the school committee. Where would we be now legally at this point?
Well, the issue having been identified by and questioned and identified by Councilor Kennedy, we have now all collectively been on notice that, and I think really everyone is in agreement that there is a constitutional violation, and yet it lingers. So one option would be to inform the other communities that the city, in an attempt to resolve this, would begin to exercise what would be the next potential step, and that would be litigation and file in the federal court and have seek the court's assistance in addressing and remedying and ultimately correcting this constitutional violation.
Councilor Mendoza.
Yeah, just for those people that might be listening in, we did have 5 options that the city solicitor presented. The first being that electing the regional school committee members by voters and member communities, with each community's representation apportioned according to population. So each community would have a certain number based on their population. Number 2 would be elect members in a district-wide election to be held at biannual state elections. And so the 8 members would run in the whole district, all the communities, and whoever got the most votes would be elected. Item number 3 is similar to number 2, electing members with residency requirements in district-wide elections, so that each community would be given a certain number of slots like they have now, and even though they would still be running across the entire district, there'd be requirements to be the top vote getter until the community slots are filled.
Correct.
And then number 4 would be they could have the same representation they have today, but those representatives' votes, each committee member would be weighed based on population. So there might not be 1 vote each. Lowell's representation might get like 1.5 votes or 2 votes each, as opposed to the other member communities. And the 5th option that was referred to that Drake had preferred was appointing committee members by locally elected officials as school board members. Each regional school district shall designate individual to serve as district clerk. Well, that's something different. My question with number 5 would be, how would that be done? I mean, because this doesn't stipulate. Would all the communities get together and then appoint the 8 members? Would they have to be from specific communities or not? And so I'm still worried about the 1 man, 1 vote rule being violated with these appointments unless some apportionment of representatives from each community.
If I may, with respect to number 5, one of the things that's interesting about it from the whole perspective of 1 man, 1 vote, and this has been noted by some federal judges as well, is that although it is listed as a remedy, it has the rather ironic effect of removing say from the voting public. And the option that was selected both by the city of Lowell and by Tingsboro continue to adhere to the democratic process in allowing people to go out and come up with a balanced way of voting, but also not violating 1 man, 1 vote. With respect to the option that was selected by Drake, that's not the case. That although it technically satisfies the 1 man, 1 vote, because procedurally there can be an appointment to this type of a board, the effect, and it's something that I know Councilor Kennedy has spoken on this before as well, it's something that I think many in the city were opposed to, because again, it begins to move you away from the democratic process that's already in place of allowing people to vote for those who are going to represent them on the school district. As to how it mechanically would work, I think that it's not an option that we really gave a lot of thought and consideration to for those reasons. And if it had been something that the city council as a whole wanted to pursue, we would then have to work, I think, with the other communities and figure out the procedure.
Because it seems to me if we did it that way and we lumped all the communities together,
Yep.
all the elected officials, then it'd be like 30 from the towns and about 15 or, well, 9 plus 6, 15 from the city. That seems lopsided given our population.
Right.
So there's something not working quite right there.
Right.
Even when we appointed a vacancy, I mean, there were a lot of members of our group from the city that would have preferred that it be done, I think Council Laurie suggested it, that it be done in a way that the next highest vote getter
Falls into that position.
falls into that position rather than appointing it. So, I mean, we've already stated in a sense that maybe there's a better way than appointments.
Right.
To fill vacancies, never mind the entire board. And now, if we did it by population, currently, if the other communities done by population are every 15,000 gets a representative. And as soon as they go over 15, they get another So currently Drake, it's got 2, on the verge of becoming 3,
Right,
with Tinsboro having 1 and Dunstable having 1 because they're below 15,000. Given that, Lowell's population would be between 7, and if we go over 105,000 population, we'd have 8 members,
yeah,
or 8 representatives on that board
Right.
versus the 4 we have now.
right. And then, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, go ahead.
I was just gonna say, and I think that's part of the problem with Dunstable's proposal. Number one, first and foremost, it wasn't what was ever discussed and agreed to when everyone met. But beyond that, it's not one of the 5, and it doesn't even fully follow the mandate set forth in the enabling legislation for the vocational school. But I think that's exactly what it's sort of referring to. And it may be that the approach was to wait some period of time until there were some other members on, and a feeling that that would somehow cure it. But I don't think that the application is in line with how the legislation is actually laid out.
So, I mean, I thought we had consensus on number 3, trying to be reasonable.
Right.
Knowing that we would still be underrepresented. I actually had made the motion at that point to proceed in order to get consensus and get us past this legal problem.
Right.
Now, if we can't keep that consensus, personally, I'd say move forward with the option of having the one-man, one-vote rule apply, which would essentially be apportioning by population, which is number 1. And then litigate it and see what we come out with.
Mr. Chairman.
Councilor Kennedy?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think that another way of looking at the 5 is that option number 1, if you just consider that the population or the number of registered voters, say, in Dunstable is equal to about 1 precinct in Lowell, then that would mean that Lowell would have 33 members appointed to the board, and then Drake and Tingsboro would have a proportionate number as well. And you would end up with this giant board that would be, I think, dysfunctional, and wouldn't really serve the purpose for that school whatsoever. So I think that for that reason alone, that's not an acceptable option. These 5 options are the ones that the state legislature saw as being solutions to the one-man, one-vote problem. If you do this, if you look at option 2, where, option D, where you're weighing the votes, then Lowell would have a distinct advantage there too. And the weighted vote for Lowell would be probably somewhere in the vicinity of 75% of the total vote. I think that if you go back and look at the original agreement, when the school was created, it was not the intent of the other communities, the other participating communities, that Lowell would have such a much louder voice than those communities. And so the way that it's set up, and the reason that that board, and the only reason that that board has an even number of people on it, is that so Lowell won't have a majority, but Lowell can have a veto. And I think that was the arrangement that seems to have been reached at that time. Option E, the appointments, I agree with you, Councilor Mendonça, that's just a bad option, but I also think that just from a practical point of view, or just from human nature, that what you're going to end up having are board members that would stick around for 20, 25 years and just get reappointed and reappointed, and I think that it would bring a staleness to that board, and I don't think that would serve the school well either. So, but I do, there was consensus back in the summer with all of the communities, and I think it was Drake that insisted that the Lowell City Council take its vote first before they did anything, and the City Council did vote unanimously in last August, and since that time, Drake has changed their position. So because of that, and because I see no other way to answer it, and because, it is, It is a violation of the Constitution. It does violate the one man, one vote principle. It is something that should be corrected. And so I would make a motion that this subcommittee recommend to the full council that they request the city manager to instruct the law department to take action towards litigation, towards correcting the problem.
I agree. I just have one question, actually, for the auditor. Dunstable wanted to expand the members. How would they have done that? Right now, if Drake goes over another 15,000, they get another member. It's my understanding, whenever one town gets another member, we get a member to, as Councilor Kennedy said, protect the veto power of the city. And that's not an option.
Right.
That-
It's not clear to me how adding another member to Drake and Lowell would, how it would be accomplished by simply saying it or agreeing to do it, and how that would have resolved the problem.
I think that's gonna happen anyway through population growth.
Exactly.
And it's just gonna put you right back in the same position we had.
That's right, and when it does happen in that way, then it follows the rules that are already set forth to that govern how that happens. The other thing too is, not only did we have the meetings and come to a consensus, but when Drake had decided to go a different course, we really weren't informed of it. We had to sort of dig into that. So in terms of moving forward with litigation, it may very well be the most practical approach to
It was my understanding
Get it
back in
resolved.
the spring when we met, and I think we all were in agreement, but some of the towns had to go back and bring it to a public meeting. They have town meetings.
right.
And I think Drake was one, I think Tingsboro was another, I think Dunstable may have too. And I don't know if they were fully in agreement or wanted to be in full agreement
Yeah.
with us. That was my feeling at the time. But looking at the options that the state legislative does give us, the 5, the appointments, I agree with Councilor Kennedy and yourself and Councilor Mendonça, that just moves away from the democratic process. And I think, not only can it just have people there for 20 years, but it doesn't give the people voting the right to put those people there. If they want to keep them there for 20 years, fine, with the vote. But without it, their hands are tied. So I agree with Councilor Kennedy's motion, and that will be a motion to instruct the city manager, have the law department seek litigation.
Yeah, to resolve the shall second.
Okay, we have a second?
Yes.
Can we have a roll call?
Chairman Laurie.
Yes.
Counsel Kennedy.
Yes.
Counsel Mendonça.
Yes.
Counsel Leahy. 3 yeas.
I guess at this point, with this council ending really next week or in 2 weeks, it will be the next council that will come back with this matter with the law department. And being in court, it could be even 2 or 3 councils down the line, as we all know. But
Mr. Chairman.
Councilor Kennedy.
Hopefully, it won't be 2 or 3 councils down the line, but because of the motion that just passed, this will come before the full council.
Right,
I think-
on the 17th.
Yeah.
At least at the latest. Will come before this council to vote on the 10th, or well, probably even the 10th. But I'm looking at a resolution. We probably won't see it. So, if there's any other questions from any other councilors or the city solicitor?
I move we adjourn.
We have a motion to adjourn?
Second.
Second, can we have a roll call?
Chairman Laurie.
Yes,
Counsel Kennedy.
Yes.
Counsel Mendonça.
Yes.
Counsel Leahy. 3 yeas.
thank you.